HOA Karen broke my 8-year-old daughter's arm with a baseball bat. She hit my little girl just for playing in our yard. Karen thought she could hurt my family and get away with it. But she didn't know I'm the county sheriff. Now she's going to pay for what she did. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Karen from the HOA broke my 8-year-old daughter's arm with a baseball bat. She hit my little girl just for playing in our yard. Karen thought she could hurt my family and get away with it. But she didn't know I'm the sheriff. Now she's going to pay for what she did. The summer heat was unbearable that Tuesday afternoon when my world changed forever. I was sitting in my office at the county sheriff's department reviewing case files when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my neighbor's number. "Sheriff Mike, you need to come home. Home right now." Mrs. Patterson's shaky voice came through the speaker. "Something terrible has happened to Emma." My heart stopped. Emma was my 8-year-old daughter. The light of my life since my wife Sarah passed away 3 years ago from cancer. I dropped everything and raced home. My patrol car sirens wailing through the quiet suburban streets of Willowbrook. When I arrived at Maple Street, I saw a crowd gathered around my front yard. My blood ran cold when I spotted the ambulance. I pushed through the people and found Emma lying on a stretcher. Her small arm bent at an unnatural angle, tears streaming down her face. The scene before me felt surreal, like I was watching it happen to someone else. My daughter, my precious Emma, was lying there in pain because of another adult's actions. The protective instinct that every parent has exploded inside me with a foresight never felt before. "Daddy," she cried when she saw me. "It hurts so much." I knelt beside her, my hands trembling as I brushed her hair from her forehead. Her face was red and blotchy from crying, and I could see the shock and confusion in her eyes. She was trying to be brave for me, just like Sarah had taught her before she passed away. "I'm here, sweetheart. Daddy's here." "What happened?" The mean lady with the clipboard hit me with a bat. Emma whispered through her sobs. "I was just getting my ball from the grass. It rolled over there." She tried to point with her good arm toward a spot near the sidewalk. I went to get it and she started yelling at me. She said I was destroying the grass and making the neighborhood look bad. I told her I was sorry and I'd be more careful, but she just got angrier. Her face turned really red. "Daddy," and she was shaking. Emma's words came out in broken fragments between sobs. She told me to get off the grass immediately, and I tried. "Daddy, I really tried. But I wasn't moving fast enough for her, I guess." That's when she went to her car. Mrs. Patterson approached me, her face filled with anger and sympathy. "Mike, it was Karen Henderson from the HOA. She went completely crazy over Emma playing in the front yard. Said the child was destroying property value and violating community standards. When Emma didn't move fast enough, Karen grabbed a baseball bat from her car, and she couldn't finish the sentence. I saw Mrs. Patterson's hands were shaking. She'd witnessed the whole thing and the trauma was written all over her face. "Mike, I've never seen anything like it." Karen was screaming about rules and regulations, about how children these days have no respect. Emma was crying and trying to explain, but Karen wouldn't listen. She raised that bat so high. Mrs. Patterson continued, her voice breaking, and Emma put her arm up to protect herself. That's when Karen brought it down. The sound of it hitting Emma's arm. Mike, I'll never forget that sound. And Emma's scream. Other neighbors started sharing what they'd seen. Mr. Peterson had been working in his garage and came running when he heard the commotion. Mrs. Lee had been getting her mail and saw the whole thing unfold. Young Tommy Harris, just 13 years old, had been riding his bike and witnessed Karen's attack. "She just kept saying that rules were rules," Tommy said, his voice small and scared. Even after Emma fell down, she was standing over her, saying that this was what happened when people didn't follow the rules. The paramedic looked at me grimly. "Sheriff, we need to get her to the hospital immediately. It looks like a compound fracture. She's going to need surgery." As they loaded Emma into the ambulance, I saw Karen Henderson standing by her white Mercedes, arms crossed, looking annoyed rather than remorseful. She was a tall woman in her 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair and expensive clothes. She'd been the HOA president for 2 years and had made life miserable for everyone in our neighborhood. This wouldn't have happened if people just followed the rules. I heard her say to another neighbor. Children shouldn't be playing unsupervised in common areas. Something dark and cold settled in my chest. I was a sheriff sworn to uphold the law, but I was also a father whose child had been brutally attacked. Right then, I made a silent promise that Karen Henderson would pay for what she'd done to my little girl. At Willowbrook General Hospital, I sat in the waiting room for 3 hours while Emma underwent surgery. The doctor, Dr. Martinez, finally came out looking tired but reassuring. The surgery went well, Sheriff Collins. We've set the bones with pins and plates. She'll need physical therapy, but she should regain full use of her arm in time. However, she'll be in a cast for at least 8 weeks and the emotional trauma. He paused. Children don't forget something like this easily. When I finally saw Emma in her hospital bed, my heart broke all over again. Her small arm was encased in a bright pink cast that seemed too heavy for her tiny body. She was awake but groggy from the anesthesia. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and pain medication. Medical equipment beeped softly in the background. Emma looked so small in that big hospital bed surrounded by machines and monitors. Her face was pale and there were dark circles under her eyes from exhaustion and trauma. I pulled a chair close to her bedside and took her good hand in mine. Felt so tiny and fragile. For 3 years since Sarah died, it had been just the two of us against the world. I'd promised my wife on her deathbed that I would always protect our daughter, that I would keep her safe from harm. And I had failed. Daddy, why did that lady hurt me? She asked, her voice small and confused. I wasn't doing anything bad. I was just getting my ball. I sat on the edge of her bed, careful not to jostle her injured arm. Sometimes, sweetheart, there are people who are very angry and take that anger out on others. But I promise you that lady will never hurt you again. Will you arrest her, Daddy? Yes, baby. I will make sure she faces justice. Emma's eyes started to close, the medication pulling her back towards sleep. Mommy would be sad if she knew someone hurt me, she whispered. Yes, she would be. But she would also be so proud of how brave you're being. I miss Mommy. I miss her too, sweetheart. Every single day. But even as I said it, I knew the legal system would likely give Karen Henderson a slap on the wrist. Assault charges against children rarely resulted in serious consequences, especially when the attacker was a wealthy woman with connections. I'd seen it too many times before. That night, after Emma fell asleep, I sat in the hospital chair and began planning. Karen Henderson wanted to play games with my family. Fine. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. Over the next few days, while Emma recovered, I began my own personal investigation into Karen Henderson. What I discovered made my blood boil even more. The first night after bringing Emma home from the hospital was the hardest. She woke up screaming 3 times, crying about the mean lady coming back to hurt her again. I held her close, whispering reassurances, but inside I was burning with rage. No child should have to feel this kind of fear in their own home. The next morning, I took Emma to her room and sat with her while she tried to eat breakfast with her left hand. Everything was a struggle for her now. Simple tasks like holding a spoon or brushing her teeth had become major challenges. She got frustrated quickly and started crying. I hate this cast, Daddy. I can't do anything. I know, baby, but it's temporary. Your arm will heal and you'll be even stronger than before. Will the mean lady come back? No, sweetheart. I promise you, she will never come near you again. That promise fueled everything I did from that moment forward. Karen Henderson had not only physically hurt my daughter, but had also stolen her sense of safety. That was unforgivable. Karen had moved to Willowbrook 5 years ago after her divorce from a wealthy businessman. She'd bought the largest house in our HOA community and immediately began asserting control. She'd been elected HOA president after running unopposed, mainly because nobody else wanted the thankless job. But Karen didn't see it as thankless. She saw it as her personal kingdom. I interviewed neighbors quietly, always in my capacity as sheriff, investigating the assault. What I learned painted a picture of systematic abuse and harassment. The elderly Mr. Johnson had been fined $500 for having his grass 2 in too tall while he was recovering from heart surgery. Karen had threatened to place a lien on his house when he couldn't pay immediately. The Martinez family had been harassed for months over the color of their front door, which Karen deemed not in compliance with community standards, even though it was clearly within the approved color palette. Young Mrs. Chen, a new mother, had been cited for having baby toys visible in her front window, which Karen called unsightly and detrimental to property values. The Hendersons, no relation to Karen, had been forced to remove a memorial garden they planted for their son who died in Afghanistan because Karen said it violated the landscaping harmony requirements. Every story made me angrier. This woman had been terrorizing my neighbors for years, and now she'd crossed the line by physically attacking my daughter. But the most damning information came from my friend, Detective Ray Morales, who worked white-collar crime in the city. We met at a small diner on the outskirts of town where no one would recognize us. Ree slid a manila folder across the table to me. "Mike, you didn't hear this from me?" Ree said over coffee, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "But we've been watching Karen Henderson for months. She's been embezzling from the HOA funds. We're talking about $30,000 over 2 years. She's been using the money for personal expenses, spa treatments, vacations, even payments on that Mercedes." I opened the folder and saw bank statements, receipts, and transaction records. The evidence was damning. Karen had been living a luxury lifestyle funded by her neighbor's HOA fees. "Look at this," Ree pointed to a specific transaction. She charged a $5,000 spa weekend to the HOA maintenance fund, claimed it was for landscaping supplies, and here a $3,000 shopping spree charged as security equipment. My jaw clenched. This woman had no moral compass whatsoever. "Can you arrest her? We're building the case, but these financial crimes take time. Could be months before we have enough evidence for the DA to prosecute." I smiled grimly. Months was too long. Emma had nightmares every night since the attack. She flinched whenever she heard loud voices. Karen Henderson had traumatized my child, and she was going to pay much sooner than that. That weekend, I sat down with my laptop and began phase 1 of my plan. As county sheriff, I had access to resources that Karen Henderson couldn't imagine. First, I requested a full audit of the HOA finances, citing irregularities brought to the attention of law enforcement. As sheriff, I had the authority to investigate potential crimes in my jurisdiction. Second, I initiated a formal investigation into Karen's assault on Emma, making sure every detail was documented properly. I interviewed every witness, took photographs of Emma's injuries, and filed comprehensive reports. Third, I began quietly reaching out to every person Karen had harassed over the years. I explained that as part of my investigation, I was documenting a pattern of aggressive behavior. By the end of the week, I had statements from 17 different neighbors detailing Karen's abuse of power. But the legal approach was just the beginning. Karen Henderson had made this personal when she hurt my daughter. It was time to return the favor. On Monday morning, Karen received a certified letter from the county sheriff's office requesting all HOA financial records for the past 3 years. She also received notice that her personal finances were being investigated as part of a criminal inquiry. I knew this would panic her, so I wasn't surprised when she called the sheriff's department that afternoon demanding to speak with me. "Sheriff Collins, this is absolutely outrageous." Her shrill voice came through the phone. "I'm being harassed because of a simple misunderstanding with your daughter. That child was trespassing and Mrs. Henderson." I interrupted, my voice ice cold. "Are you calling to confess to assaulting an 8-year-old child with a deadly weapon?" That's not, it wasn't like that because I have 17 witness statements that say otherwise. I also have hospital records showing my daughter required surgery due to injuries you inflicted. Now you mentioned financial records. When can I expect those to be delivered?" The line went quiet for a long moment. "I'll have my lawyer contact you," she finally said. "That's your right, Mrs. Henderson, but the investigation will continue regardless. Have a good day." After I hung up, I allowed myself a small smile. Karen was used to bullying people who couldn't fight back. She had no idea how to handle someone with real power who wasn't afraid of her. That evening, Karen's lawyer, an expensive, suited man named Richard Blackwood, called me. "Sheriff Collins, My client is willing to pay for your daughter's medical expenses in exchange for dropping this matter. Mr. Blackwood, your client committed aggravated assault on a child. The state will prosecute whether I want them to or not, but I appreciate her offer to pay Emma's medical bills. We'll consider that when calculating damages in our civil lawsuit. Civil lawsuit. Oh yes. Assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and child abuse. I'm thinking we'll start at $500,000 and see where we end up. The lawyer's confident tone evaporated. Sheriff, perhaps we could discuss this through the proper legal channels. Absolutely, Mr. Blackwood. Have a good evening. I hung up and checked on Emma, who was coloring with her good hand at the kitchen table. She looked up at me with her big brown eyes, so much like her mother's, and smiled. Daddy, Mrs. Patterson brought me ice cream, she said. Is the mean lady in trouble now? That's right, sweetheart. The mean lady is in a lot of trouble. By Wednesday, word had spread through the neighborhood about Karen's attack on Emma and the subsequent investigation. The community was finally seeing their HOA president's true nature, and they didn't like what they saw. I started receiving calls from neighbors I barely knew. Mrs. Garcia from 3 houses down called to say she was praying for Emma. Mr. Thompson, who usually kept to himself, stopped by with a basket of toys and books for Emma to enjoy during her recovery. Sheriff, what that woman did was evil, Mr. Thompson said, his voice shaking with anger. My grandson is the same age as Emma. If someone hurt him like that, I don't know what I'd do. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. Emma received dozens of cards, drawings from her classmates, and even a giant teddy bear from the local fire department. For the first time since Sarah died, I felt like we weren't alone in this world. Mrs. Patterson organized a neighborhood meeting for Thursday evening. I didn't attend. It would have been inappropriate as the investigating officer, but she filled me in afterward. Mike, you should have seen it, she said, her eyes bright with satisfaction. 23 families showed up, and every single one had a story about Karen's abuse. The Johnsons talked about the grass vines. The Martinez family shared how she made their teenage daughter cry over some chalk art on their driveway. And Mrs. Chin broke down talking about how Karen called her baby a disturbance to the peace. What did they decide? Unanimous vote of no confidence. Karen Henderson is no longer HOA president. We're also voting to press charges as a community for harassment and abuse of power. This was better than I'd hoped. Karen wasn't just facing legal trouble. She was being completely ostracized by the people she'd terrorized for years. But I wasn't done yet. Karen worked as a real estate agent for Premium Properties, one of the most prestigious firms in the county. Her business depended on her reputation and connections in the community. On Friday, I paid a visit to her boss, Margaret Webb, the owner of Premium Properties. Sheriff Collins, what a surprise. How's little Emma doing? She's healing. Thank you for asking. Actually, Margaret, I'm here on official business. I need to inform you that one of your agents, Karen Henderson, is under investigation for assault on a child, embezzlement, and harassment. Margaret's face went pale. Assault on a child. My God, what happened? I gave her the basic facts, watching as her expression grew more horrified with each detail. Sheriff, I had no idea. Karen always seemed so professional. I'm sure she did, but I thought you should know that she's facing serious criminal charges. The local media will probably pick up the story soon. Of course. Thank you for telling me personally. I'll need to discuss this with our legal team. By Monday morning, Karen Henderson was no longer employed by Premium Properties. Word spread quickly through the real estate community. In a business built on trust and reputation, being fired for assaulting a child was career suicide. 2 weeks after Emma's attack, the HOA audit results came back. Detective Morales delivered them personally along with an arrest warrant. Mike, it's worse than we thought. She stole $47,000 over 3 years. She's been using HOA money for everything. Her mortgage, car payments, vacations, even plastic surgery. He spread out more documents on my desk. Look at this paper trail. She's been methodical about it, creating fake invoices from non-existent companies. She'd approve the payments herself, Then deposit the checks into her personal account. We've traced everything. Enough for felony charges. Oh yeah, grand theft, embezzlement, fraud, and about 6 other charges we can stack on. She's looking at 5 to 7 years if convicted, maybe more with the assault charges added on top. Ray leaned back in his chair. You know what the ironic part is? If she just kept her head down and not attacked your daughter, we probably wouldn't have moved this fast on the embezzlement case. She literally brought all of this on herself. Karma, I said quietly. The most satisfying kind, Ray agreed. That afternoon, I had the pleasure of personally serving Karen Henderson with her arrest warrant. She answered the door in her bathrobe, her hair a mess, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Karen Henderson, you're under arrest for embezzlement, grand theft, and fraud, I said, reading her rights as I handcuffed her. This is harassment, she screamed. You're only doing this because of your daughter. Ma'am, this is about you stealing money from your neighbors. The assault charges are separate. As I led her to my patrol car, neighbors came out of their houses to watch. Some were smiling, others looked satisfied, but no one looked sorry to see Karen Henderson in handcuffs. At the jail, as I was processing her booking, Karen broke down completely. Sheriff, please, I can pay it all back. I made a mistake with your daughter. I was having a bad day and she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I stopped what I was doing and looked at her directly. Mrs. Henderson, you attacked an 8-year-old girl with a baseball bat because she was playing in her own front yard. That's not a mistake. That's who you are. You don't understand the pressure I was under, she said desperately. The HOA, the neighbors, everyone expecting perfection. I just snapped. You snapped. I repeated, my voice dangerously low. My daughter needed surgery. She has nightmares every night. She's terrified to go outside. You didn't just snap, Mrs. Henderson. You chose violence against a child who couldn't defend herself. That's not pressure. That's evil. She started crying, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. But I felt no sympathy. I thought about Emma's nightmares, about how she flinched when she heard loud voices, about all the nights I'd held her while she cried from the pain in her arm. My life is ruined, Karen whispered. You ruined it yourself, I replied. When you decided that your petty power was more important than treating people with basic human decency, and you ruined my daughter's childhood. She'll carry the scars of what you did for the rest of her life. I finished the booking paperwork in silence. Karen sat in the holding cell, her head in her hands, finally facing the consequences of her actions. Karen's assault trial was scheduled for September. Her embezzlement trial would follow in October. But before we got that far, something happened that surprised everyone. Emma wanted to testify. Daddy, I want to tell the judge what the mean lady did to me, she said one evening as I was helping her with her homework. Her cast had been replaced with a smaller one, but she still struggled to write with her dominant hand. Sweetheart, you don't have to do that. The grown-ups can handle this. But I want her to know that she hurt me, and I want other kids to know it's okay to tell when grown-ups hurt them. My brave little girl. She was only 8 years old, but she already understood justice better than most adults. The district attorney, Patricia Valdez, agreed to let Emma testify if she wanted to. We spent weeks preparing her, making sure she understood what would happen and that she could change her mind at any time. Patricia was gentle but thorough in her preparation. Emma, when you're on the witness stand, the lawyer for the mean lady might ask you questions. He might try to confuse you or make you feel bad. But remember, you just have to tell the truth about what happened. Emma nodded. Seriously, I can do that. I'm not scared anymore. But I could see the fear in her eyes. She was trying to be brave for me just like I was trying to be strong for her. We were both carrying wounds that would take time to heal. We practiced every night. Emma would sit in a chair and I'd ask her questions the way the lawyers would. Sometimes she'd get emotional and have to stop. Other times, she'd power through with determination that amazed me. Why do you want to do this, sweetheart? I asked her one night after a particularly difficult practice session. You don't have to testify. The lawyers have enough evidence without you. Emma looked at me with those wise eyes that seemed too old for her 8 years. Because if I don't, the mean lady might hurt another kid someday. And that kid might not have a daddy who's a sheriff to protect them. My heart swelled with pride and broke with sorrow at the same time. My little girl had grown up too fast because of one woman's cruelty. On the day of the trial, Emma wore her favorite blue dress and held my hand tightly as we walked into the courthouse. Karen was there with her expensive lawyer, looking pale and thin. She'd lost weight during the month since her arrest, and her perfectly styled hair had grown out to show gray roots. When Emma took the stand, the courtroom was completely silent. She spoke in her clear, high voice about playing in the yard, about trying to get her ball, about the scary lady with the clipboard who yelled at her. Then she went to her car and got a big stick. Emma said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. She said I was a bad kid who didn't listen. But I wasn't being bad. I was just getting my ball. What happened next, Emma? The prosecutor asked gently. She hit me with the stick. It hurt so much that I fell down and couldn't get up. I was crying for my daddy, but he wasn't there. I watched Karen's face during Emma's testimony. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, she looked genuinely ashamed. She was crying silently, her hands shaking in her lap. Emma continued, my arm broke and I had to have surgery. I was scared because my mommy died in the hospital and I thought I might die too. That broke my heart all over again. Emma had never told me she was afraid of dying during her surgery. The doctors fixed my arm, but it still hurts sometimes, Emma concluded. And I have bad dreams about the mean lady hurting me again. When Emma finished testifying, the defense attorney chose not to cross-examine her. Even Karen's expensive lawyer wasn't heartless enough to attack an 8-year-old victim on the stand. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts: assault with a deadly weapon, child abuse, and aggravated battery. Karen Henderson was sentenced to 2 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months. She would also pay $200,000 in civil damages to cover Emma's medical expenses, therapy costs, and pain and suffering. Karen's embezzlement trial was almost anticlimactic after the emotional assault case. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, receipts, witness testimony from neighbors who had paid fees that Karen pocketed. She pleaded guilty and received an additional 3 years to run concurrent with her assault sentence. She would also have to pay back every penny she'd stolen, plus interest and penalties. But the most satisfying part wasn't the prison sentence or the financial restitution. It was watching the community come together in the aftermath of Karen's reign of terror. With Karen gone, the neighborhood transformed. The new HOA president was Mr. Johnson, the elderly veteran whom Karen had harassed over his grass height. His first act was to revise all of the ridiculous rules Karen had implemented. At his first official meeting as president, Mr. Johnson addressed the community. Folks, I've been thinking a lot about what kind of neighborhood we want to be. Karen Henderson ruled through fear and intimidation. I think it's time we led with kindness and common sense. He proposed new guidelines that focused on maintaining property values through reasonable standards, not tyrannical control. Grass could be up to 4 in before requiring a trim. Front doors could be any color from an expanded palette. Children's toys were welcome in yards. Memorial gardens were encouraged. The vote was unanimous. The Martinez family repainted their front door to a beautiful turquoise blue that made their house look welcoming and cheerful. When I saw it, I made a point to stop and compliment them. "Sheriff, we've wanted to paint it this color for 3 years," Mrs. Martinez said, tears in her eyes. But Karen said it was too bold. She made us feel ashamed for wanting to express ourselves. "It's beautiful," I told her honestly. "It makes the whole street brighter." Mrs. Chun put up wind chimes and planted flowers without fear of citations. The Hendersons recreated their memorial garden for their fallen son, and the whole neighborhood contributed plants and stones. Emma's arm healed completely, just as Dr. Martinez had predicted. The physical therapy was hard work, but she approached it with the same determination she'd shown during the trial. By Christmas, she was back to playing soccer and climbing trees. The nightmares took longer to fade, but with the help of a wonderful therapist, Emma learned to cope with her trauma. Dr. Sarah Chun, Emma's therapist, was a miracle worker. She specialized in childhood trauma and had a gentle way of helping Emma process what had happened without re-traumatizing her. Emma is incredibly resilient. Dr. Chin told me after one of their sessions. She's processing this in a very healthy way. The fact that she saw justice served, that she saw the person who hurt her face consequences, that's actually helping her healing process. Many victims never get that closure. Over the months, I watched Emma transform from a scared little girl who flinched at loud noises into a confident young person with a mission. She even started an anti-bullying program at her school, talking to other kids about standing up to mean people and telling adults when someone hurt them. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, called me one afternoon. "Sheriff Collins, I wanted you to know that Emma gave a presentation to her class today about her experience. She was so brave and articulate. Several children came forward after her talk to report bullying they'd been experiencing. Your daughter is making a real difference." I felt pride swell in my chest. Emma had taken the worst experience of her young life and turned it into something positive. She was helping other children find their voice just as she had found hers in that courtroom. "Daddy," she said one evening as we were making dinner together, "I'm glad the mean lady can't hurt other kids now." "Me too, sweetheart. You were very brave to tell everyone what happened. You taught me to always tell the truth, even when it's scary." Looking at my daughter, healthy, confident, and strong despite everything she'd endured, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with justice. Karen Henderson was released from prison after serving 18 months. She'd lost her house to foreclosure. Her car had been repossessed and her real estate license had been permanently revoked. I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved to another state to live with a sister working as a clerk in a small grocery store. The woman who had once terrorized an entire neighborhood with her petty authority was now bagging groceries and making minimum wage. Part of me felt sorry for how far she'd fallen. But then I would remember Emma lying on that stretcher, crying for her daddy, and any sympathy I felt would disappear. Some people might say I went too far, that I used my position as sheriff to settle a personal score. But I disagree. Everything I did was legal and justified. I investigated crimes, gathered evidence, and ensured that justice was served. Karen Henderson had spent years abusing people who couldn't fight back. She'd terrorized children, harassed the elderly, and stolen money from her own neighbors. When she finally picked on the wrong family, she discovered that actions have consequences. Emma is 10 now, and she still has a small scar on her arm from where the bone broke through her skin. But she wears it like a badge of honor, proof that she survived something terrible and came out stronger on the other side. Our neighborhood is peaceful now, filled with families who look out for each other instead of tearing each other down. Children play in their front yards without fear, and neighbors actually talk to each other instead of just exchanging citations and complaints. As for me, I learned that being a father and being a sheriff sometimes require the same skills. Protecting the innocent, standing up to bullies, and making sure that justice is served. Karen Henderson broke my daughter's arm with a baseball bat. She didn't know I was the county sheriff. She found out and she'll never hurt another child again.